Coming up on this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, prohibitionists are starting to feed Congress and the public with negative research on cannabis studies, while federal reform looks bleak for cannabis in the 119th Congress. And Colorado Springs has issued a revote ballot question on adult use that already passed in November, but the city's council there won't accept that result, so Colorado Springs voters get a mulligan or a do-over with an April election. Plus, what impact will Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation have on the existing cannabis market in that country? Debi Facey has some insight from Ontario.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News, reporting from the backwaters of the Mississippi River, ice fishing for bull sharks.
The Chicago Clone Guy reports from a frozen Illinois lakeside, while his state continues to grapple with mislabeling of cannabis products. And was President Donald Trump tricked into supporting the Yes on 3 adult use initiative in Florida? One GOP senator in that state claims the language was confusing enough to start a new campaign for 2026. Plus, the race to become the 25th adult use legal state faces some pushback in Indiana, while Pennsylvania and Hawaii seem to be ready to move forward. All that, plus state reports from coast to coast on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly roundup of the news from the cannabis industry. I'm Alaina Pinto. Here's your reminder to download our app, PCMTV, for free at the App Store or Google Play. You can keep up with the biggest stories from the cannabis industry every week, and that includes the new live stream on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern on 7 different social media platforms, simultaneously on YouTube, Meta, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Rumble, Discord, and Cannabis X America. Our top story this week continues to review the impact of the new administration in Washington, D.C. Nomination hearings for members of President Trump's cabinet continued all week, with RFK Jr. getting grilled by senators who got confrontational at times, but surprisingly was never asked about federal reform of cannabis. What were his thoughts on that? We'll never know, as Congress decides on his future as the nominee to head the Department of Health and Human Services. A more ominous development comes out of the Banking and Finance Committee. That's where a GOP senator made it clear this week that safer banking for the cannabis industry is a non-starter for the 119th Congress. They've decided that they will only hear testimony from federally legal industries, pretty much dismissing any hope of reform for the next 2 years. Our man in Washington, D.C. is Andrew Behringer, and he has more on that.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In what could be a pivotal moment for the cannabis industry, the Senate Banking Committee is set to hold a hearing this Wednesday on the controversial practice of debanking. However, industry insiders worry their voices may go unheard. Committee Chairman Tim Scott, a South Carolina Republican, has focused the hearing specifically on federal legal businesses, effectively excluding the state legal cannabis industry that employs currently over 440,000 Americans. Now, the timing is particularly crucial as currently the control of Congress is shifted. Republicans now hold majority in both chambers, and despite former President Trump's campaign promises to support cannabis banking reform, significant hurdles still remain. The cannabis industry's banking struggles are very well documented. Even Bank of America, which recently stated it would never close accounts for political reasons, has faced current criticism from industry leaders. While the Safe Banking Act, which would provide protections for financial institutions serving the cannabis industry, is expected to be reintroduced this session, its timing remains uncertain. The bill previously passed the House 7 times with bipartisan support, but has yet to receive a full Senate vote. For now, the industry watches and waits, hoping their stories of financial exclusion will resonate with lawmakers, even if they're not officially part of Wednesday's hearing. That's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There were no fewer than 4 different studies released this week on the impact of cannabis use on the brain, all concluding that using cannabis moderately or daily has a negative impact on your brain over time. Another one claims that cannabis can lead to heart failure. Yet in the same week, researchers on the impact of CBD or cannabidiol has very little negative impact on the brain or the heart. Most of the reporting by traditional media was on the study released by the University of Colorado's medical school, claiming that any use of cannabis impacts working memory or brain function during cognitive tasks. The use of MRIs in the study also concluded that this interaction with the brain's neurotransmitters can have long-lasting impact on users. It's likely anyone who has used cannabis or even had a drink of alcohol knows the impact on brain function. And in fact, one of the most common medical uses of cannabis is to relieve stress and anxiety. Altering one's consciousness is one of the desired effects of this plant. There are a number of studies that continue to look at experiences of regular users over a long period of time. It's another reason why we preach responsible consumption. And let's face it, we are in the middle of the largest uncontrolled clinical study of a drug in history, with 40 states decriminalizing it and 24 others legalizing adult use. It's interesting that this study comes out of Colorado, which was one of the 2 states to legalize it first in 2014. Perhaps a bigger concern in that state is what is going on in its second largest city, Colorado Springs. Voters there approved expanding the existing medical market to adult use with 54% of the vote in November, passing question 300. But since then, the city council has done nothing on moving towards implementing the adult use rules and regulations, and now they've announced the fall ballot question wasn't clear enough, so they will have a revote on this one issue in April. Citizens in that city are now suing the city council, claiming that this special revote is unconstitutional. PCM TV founder Jimmy Young talked one-on-one with the senior content producer of greenstate.com, Kara Whitstock, about the Colorado Springs situation this week.
They're going to have another vote. They're going to have a special vote now just for the adult use.
It was actually really disheartening the way the city council spoke. They literally called the voters confused about their voting for the ballot question because of the second initiative that the city council put on the ballot to make it confusing. And so many advocates of cannabis are concerned that they want to take this vote to April because there will not be as many voters turning out.
Right.
So they're hoping that it slides under and the voters that show up vote to repeal. So I think it's up to the activists in town to keep people informed.
That entire one-on-one special report is on our YouTube channel and on our PCM TV app. With more from Colorado, here's Xavier Jaillet.
I'm Xavier Jaillet, chairman of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and a non-attorney professional with the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's going on in Colorado this week. I've got 2 stories to share with everyone today, and the first is related to the adult use sales initiative passed in Colorado Springs in November's vote of last year. As some of the listeners will know, adult use sales were approved by a majority of voters in Colorado Springs. Now, unfortunately, the city council in Colorado Springs has issued a notice of a second vote, attempting to repeal the voters' desires initially found in the November vote approving adult use sales. This vote will occur on April 1st in a special election, and city council members claim that the language of the ballot may have confused voters and that they don't believe that voters truly knew that they were voting to legalize cannabis in Colorado Springs. So come April 1st, we'll have another vote regarding the future of adult use recreational sales in Colorado Springs. Now, the second story is related to a yeast and mold recall issued in conjunction with the Colorado Department of Revenue and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. This recall is related to yeast and mold levels found in unacceptable amounts in recreational adult use flower products sold by Med Farms Holdings LLC, which does business as Bud and Mary's here in Colorado. Now, these products were sold between February 7th and December 20th of 2024, and the firm has indicated a willingness and a voluntariness to work with authorities to ensure that consumers are protected, properly notified of the recall, and given attempts at recourse to return those products and exchange them for compliant products in the future. That's the Colorado Cannabis News Report this week. I'm Xavier Jaillet reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Next up, another state with challenges is Oregon. Sure enough, there was another dispensary that closed in that state this week called the Portland Cannabis Market. And actually, that store was called the Costco of cannabis. Marianne Cursetjee has some details on what happened to PCM.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Another cannabis licensee has gone out of business. Portland Cannabis Market, PCM, was robbed again, and this proved too much for the business to endure. PCM was designed to be a wholesale shopping location where they would stock mostly bulk pounds, and then retailers would come in and buy for their dispensaries. They have suffered a number of robberies over the years, blamed on poor support from local law enforcement. Next, attorney Vince Slawowski writes an annual forecast for the Oregon cannabis industry. His forecast is that cannabis will not be a legislative priority this year, and that any bills to pass would likely be only scaffolding and maintenance. And finally, retailers and processors are working through the implications of Ballot Measure 119, which passed last November. This measure requires a labor peace agreement with a union before the state cannabis license can be renewed. This is proving to be challenging as it applies to all of these licensees regardless of size. So a single owner licensee without any employees is still required to sign an LPA with a union. Also, there have been reports of predatory organizations charging for this service, once again taking advantage of cannabis businesses. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now we can give you an update on the race to become the 25th adult use state in the U.S., equaling half of the total in this country. Pennsylvania, once again, is starting to move in that direction. This time, the budget crisis might serve as the impetus to get adult use over the finish line. The state's budget gap is $3.7 billion, and there are a few options to close that gap without moving towards adult use legalization. This week, that state's Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, will be calling for this in his annual State of the State address in the Keystone State. One of the facts to move forward with this is that 60% of people from Pennsylvania are doing their cannabis shopping in the border states of New Jersey, Ohio, and Maryland. Pennsylvania has tried before, but now advocates are hoping the mood has changed in their legislature. Not such good news in Indiana, where a Republican-led Congress in that state has now blocked the reform amendment that was introduced a few weeks ago. That measure sought to declassify cannabis as a federally illegal Schedule I drug, but was soundly defeated by that state's GOP leaders. Indiana is surrounded by legal adult use states, so many lawmakers are looking to keep those revenues in their own state. No such issues in Arizona, but plenty more items are up for debate in that state's legislature. Here's Karen Black with our Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The 57th session of the Arizona legislature includes several cannabis-related measures. I reported on two last week, a House bill that would restrict cannabis advertising and a Senate bill to release funds for cannabis research. Here's the rundown on four others. To close a loophole stemming from the state's definition of schools, a Senate bill would restrict medical dispensaries and cultivation sites from being within 500 feet of preschools and childcare facilities. Two House bills are aimed at veterans. One appropriates $10 million to the health department to issue and renew medical cards for former service members, and the other would give honorably discharged veterans financial relief on medical cards. An interesting House concurrent resolution would prohibit the establishment of cannabis dispensaries and testing labs on unincorporated land surrounded on all sides by Indian reservations. If passed by both chambers, the issue will go to the public for a vote. Speaking of legislation, the Arizona chapter of NORML is holding its annual lobby days February 3rd through 6th in Phoenix. Check out their Facebook page if you're interested in volunteering. Meanwhile, in Tucson, NORML is participating in a local highway cleanup effort February 1st. In other legal news, Janet Jackham has joined Phoenix law firm Fenimore as a director in its business and finance practice group. Ms. Jackham is on the board of directors of the Arizona Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, the legal committee of NORML, and is the secretary of the Arizona Cannabis Bar Association. And finally, there were 3 cannabis events in Phoenix this past week: Canna Friends, Mita, and Maggie Jane's Mocktail Hour. Good times. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
One more state that is looking for the right time to enact adult use and sale of cannabis is Hawaii. This week, Hawaii lawmakers and state officials held open hearings on the potential for a legalized cannabis market in that state. Interestingly, not only would this new bill regulate the cannabis industry, but would also put hemp-derived products under the same regulatory body. The goal is to open the market in January of 2026, where adults could grow at home, plus possess 1 ounce of cannabis and 5 milligrams of concentrate. If Hawaii passes this bill, they would be the first state to have a single regulatory board to oversee both the hemp and THC cannabis industries. There was some progress in New York State this week as their governor, Kathy Hochul, signed a bill that would reopen cannabis farmers markets. Details on that and more with Pam Chmiel. Our New York State Cannabis Report is now.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York. New York Governor Kathy Hochul has signed a bill to revive the previously discontinued farmers markets. However, details on the applications have yet to be released. Hopefully, the Office of Cannabis Management can get everything in place before summer as farmers are eager to gear up for the season. And in other news, the well-known California brand Stisley is officially entering the New York market on September 7th. Already a dominant force in 7 states, Stisley's products have flooded New York's illegal markets for the past few years. Last summer, Stisley was sued in California for allegedly marketing dangerous high-potency vapes to youth. It's unclear how a product with so many accusations of unethical business practices would get approved for a brand license by the New York State Office of Cannabis Management. And it will be interesting to see if Stisley's presence in the New York legal market leads to the sudden disappearance of their products from storefronts that are illegal. And meanwhile, cannabis beverages continue to surge in popularity across the country, with hemp-derived drinks making their way into wine, beer, and liquor stores. In New York, 6 marijuana-infused beverage brands are competing for the market. According to Headset data, the Heirloom brand is leading by a significant margin. They raked in $5 million in sales in the last half of 2024. and the remaining 5 beverage brands are lagging far behind, with sales only hovering around $100,000 during the same time period. Heirloom started with a significant brand awareness and is well known for its 100-year-old apple farm, before switching to making marijuana-infused apple cider. And finally, New York Fashion Week is about to heat up, and New York cannabis brands are making an appearance on the runway. Newcomer Pink and LGBTQ brand Flamer are among the local cannabis brands participating in the festivities. We'll have more updates on the show next week. For now, this is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York.
That'll do it for the A block, or first section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. But coming up, we will head out to the Midwest to hear from the Chicago clone guy, Mark Allen, who reports from one of the many frozen lakes in Illinois. We'll be right back.
Ice fishing for bull sharks while I'm sitting on a bucket in the rain. It's kind of nasty out here, but we got some good ice. Today's report is about a dispensary.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
Welcome back to the B block of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. The state of Illinois continues to emerge as a major player in the Midwest adult use legalization market, with new dispensaries opening every week. Now there is a class action suit in that state claiming that some state licensed dispensaries are mislabeling infused products in order to exceed the state limit for THC. Mark Allen is the Chicago clone guy who finds himself as cold as ice and as wet as a noodle. Here's his report from Illinois, right in the middle of a frozen lake.
What's up, everybody? This is Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, reporting from Illinois. This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News, reporting from the backwaters of the Mississippi River, ice fishing for bull sharks while I'm sitting on a bucket in the rain. It's kind of nasty out here, but we got some good ice. Today's report is about a new dispensary that opened up in northern Illinois in the Chain of Lakes area, is what we call it in Fox Lake. It's called the Smokehouse. The reason why I'm talking about a dispo, there's dispos everywhere, is because this dispo is a little different. You can actually take your boat to this dispo, which I thought was pretty cool. As an avid outdoorsman, ice fisherman, I'd prefer not to be on the ice, but it's better than nothing. But the Smokehouse in the Chain of Lakes, Fox Lake, Illinois, you can actually take your boat to now. They have 16 boat slips for pretty much anybody that is 21 and over. Residents can go, non-residents can go. So if you're people that are visiting, the Chain of Lakes is actually a good time to go visit, and then you can actually go get your buds there. So all you need to be is 21. You can get about 15 grams of weed. That's also known to me as about 15 joints for you out-of-staters. But that's known as the Smokehouse Dispo in Fox Lake. I am Mark Allen, the Chicago clone guy, checking out from Illinois for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Earlier in the show, we told you about the closing of an Oregon dispensary called the Portland Cannabis Market. Marianne Cursetjee explained that dispensary had been a target of half dozen robberies during its 7-year existence. Violence at dispensaries continues to be a major issue in the industry, considering the regulations on a federally illegal substance forces cash transactions in stores. Meanwhile, the lawmakers in Washington, D.C. continue to stonewall the industry from creating a safer banking alternative. Once again, in California, there's another violent story at a dispensary, as Dina Nagib has the sad details in her California Cannabis Report.
Hello, I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest news in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Last Monday evening, Martin Olive, owner of the Vapor Room in San Francisco, was shot 6 times in an unprovoked attack while smoking outside the dispensary. After the attack, the gunman hid in an apartment building next door where he was later shot and killed by police. Martin has been a longtime cannabis advocate and a pillar of the cannabis community. Many from the community rallied to support Martin, with social media flooded with stories of all that Martin has done for cannabis. A GoFundMe has already raised over $100,000 after less than a week from the incident. Though Martin's injuries are serious, he is expected to make a full recovery. In other news, longtime cannabis breeder David Watson, aka Sam the Skunk Man, died this week. He spent time in both California and Amsterdam working with others to create many unique cultivars, including Haze and Skunk. His impact was vast and was referred to by some as a patriarch of the cannabis industry. Watson requested that his ashes be used for the next cannabis crop, and they will be distributed to California and abroad. That's it for this week. I'm Dina Nagib with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Here in New England, the great state of Maine has enjoyed their legalization of adult use of cannabis since 2016. That state grandfathered hundreds of caregivers who grew cannabis for existing medical patients, but never really set up regulations for testing. They are trying to do that right now. But like every issue in the industry, it's not as simple as setting up regulations for testing, since there are hundreds of small craft growers who have been left alone and now face a whole new world that might put them out of business and back into the illicit market. One of the oldest caregivers and advocates for a fair and legal cannabis market is Pete Tranchemontagne, known as Uncle Pete from Uncle Pete's Relief. He is a legend in the state and has always been in the middle of policy changes in the Pine Tree State. PCM TV founder Jimmy Young talked with Uncle Pete this week.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another special report from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I am PCM TV founder Jimmy Young, and I'm so happy to be joined by an old friend. And I'm sorry I used the word old, Pete, but you know what? We go back over about a decade now, and I really appreciate you taking the time out, because the state of Maine is a very interesting dynamic in the whole world of the adult use, medical, and caregiver of cannabis. And I know you've been in the middle of it now since 2011. Right now, I believe they're trying to regulate the medical side of the cannabis products that are being grown in Maine, and they want to make it similar testing to adult use. Am I accurate in that assessment?
It's pretty much what they sound like they're trying to do. Yes.
Okay.
You want me to comment on that?
No, I'm not going to comment on it. I want somebody who knows what they're talking about to comment on it. Yes.
So yes, we want, in the medical program, they've always been, like I said, we've been testing, most of us anyways. The problem is there's not a standardized test for our understanding. We could be wrong, but I know, I'm going to use a name, Scotty Olette. He does Smokies Gummies. He runs, and his company is Golden Road Extractions, and he does Up to Camp Edibles. That's another company. He sent out a test because he gets distillate, he buys big jugs, because he makes massive batch lots of however they do it, right?
Yep.
Because he wholesales. Because he's like, I need to know if these are right, because sometimes after they all are finished product, he has to send them out again to make sure it's 10 milligrams or under, right, not over, or 20 milligrams, because he might have palliative care patients, and now this is going to all these stores. He's not warning people, or it's got to be, it's a real business.
Right.
So,
and you want regulation, and you want standardized testing is really what you'd like to see happen.
So yeah, we want all the labs because he sent out this distillate to four different labs, and he got four different, two passed, two failed, and four different totally different reads.
And the novelty has worn off by now. And now you're really dealing with real business issues. And like you said, people are coming in from out of state. How would you like to see the control of the licensing happen in your state that would be fair to the people that are already doing it and have been doing it in Maine for a long time?
So that is the most awesome question I think we've ever discussed. Okay, so thank you so much because this is dear to me. We don't want to, I don't like to be told what to do, and I know you don't either, right? Who does? I don't want to tell all the other caregivers in the state of Maine and or the adult rec people what to do because they were right. They're here, right? They risk everything.
Yep.
But I really feel that um, we should just stop any new applications coming into our state because
Freeze them, freeze them, freeze
well, there's
applications.
only 1.3 million, and then there's what 3.4 million tourism.
Yep.
So let's do the math for that. Let's get ready for interstate and international, and then you increase more. Or it's like, say you owned a store, or we'll use mine. I'm here in my basement. I'm not limiting myself to go to research or adult rec on my property. You can apply for everything because you still have you're still on this license. So I'm not hurting caregivers. I'm certainly opening it up to them to go to adult rec. I think when you have a license, it should be what do you want to do? You know, because it would just be an extra on your license fee.
While many states have outright banned intoxicating hemp products, others, like Texas, have ignored regulation and allowed over 7,000 stores to sell products out of gas stations, smoke shops, and convenience markets. At the same time, in that state, their legal medical dispensaries struggle for acceptance. Now, there is a movement in Missouri to bring all versions of cannabis under one regulatory body. We welcome back Brandon Jones with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. And that's right, they are talking about putting all hemp-derived products underneath one single body here in the state of Missouri. So as you know, under the federal law of 2018's Farm Bill, they're allowing all sorts of different products to be sold in gas stations, hemp shops, and all sorts of different places all over the state. So they're trying to make sure that all these products are safe for everyone to use because we're finding some products, yes, are marketed towards children. You see weird products like things that are designed for them to look like children's products that they would eat. So I think it's a very important thing that we need to make sure that all of the products are safe, tested, and that we know what they're ingesting, smoking, whatever type of product they're doing. They know what they're getting. So I am all for there being one form of body that makes sure that everything is going to be tested and regulated the right way. But let's make sure that people still have access to the products that they need. Let's not put a big stranglehold and stop access to everyone as soon as this happens. Let's make sure that there's a way that people still have access to the medicine that they need. On a little bit of a lighter note in Missouri, yes, the Chiefs, we're back for 3 times, and there is consumption lounges, parties all over the state. So if you're not aware, you can be joining a membership club and be in a lounge where you can consume your own cannabis. It is BYOC. You cannot consume or purchase any cannabis in any of these lounges, but you can bring your own cannabis, be among friends, have a huge big screen TV and cheer on your Chiefs and not have to worry about driving home drunk or around. You know, now you have to be able to watch the drunks when you're driving home, but at least you're not going to be intoxicated driving. So there's a safer way to be among friends, watch the games, and still be able to enjoy yourselves and have fun. So while we're looking about the state and regulatory ways, we're still trying to have fun here in Missouri as well. So I am excited to be back to the Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Thanks so much to Alaina and Jimmy. Miss you guys. Grow so excited to be back and bringing the Missouri news to you guys every week.
The state of Kentucky is slowly ramping up its new medical marijuana program. This week, their governor, Andy Beshear, reported that his state has issued medical cards to over 2,200 applicants, and only 51 have been turned down. But those who have been denied to the program do have the right to reapply. One of the issues in Kentucky is related to the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Right now, you can't have a medical marijuana card that allows you access to their fledgling market if you own a gun. And now their governor would like to see that state ban on owning firearms lifted for medical patients. This is not an exception in Kentucky yet, but in Nevada, people with medical cards are also prohibited from owning or carrying a firearm. At some point, this might change, but right now, as long as cannabis is on Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, gun ownership is off limits. Let's check in on Nevada and the tribal nations with Tina Tasaka.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. With the recent cyber attack in cannabis earlier in January impacting Stizzy, nearly 370,000 patrons' data was breached. Every cannabis operator needs to be vigilant about their data and needs to have a plan on protecting that data. Furthermore, back on September 11th, 2023, Las Vegas experienced one of the planet's worst cyber attacks on the casino industry, whereby MGM paid a ransom to the tune of $100 million. Why this matters and what does this have to do with cannabis? In tribal nations, there are close to 450 casinos across the U.S., and there are close to 90 dispensaries, consumption lounges, and/or cultivation operations on sovereign land. Tribal nations needs to be just as diligent and watchful to protect and secure their data, and they do. Here comes Tribal Hub, founded in 1999 by Mike Day, tribal leaders, and technology gurus, and it's comprised of technology-minded leaders from tribes and tribal enterprises across the country. They are about to embark on their cybersecurity summit along with their division, Tribal ISAC, Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It will be held at the end of February at the Mississippi Casino and Resort in Miami, Florida. Other regional tribal technology forums will then follow. For more information, you can see their website, www.tribalhub.com. Okay, Golden Knights and NHL fans, NHL players are shifting away from alcohol and partying, instead favoring marijuana and video games for leisure. A recent New York Times survey of over 36 players found that 2/3 used edibles this season. This cultural shift comes as Nevada regulators adopted a rule in October protecting athletes from penalties for legal marijuana use. Go VGK! That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the B block of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast news, but we still have more state reports, including checking in with Amie Carter in Michigan and Doug Miller's High on Wall Street report on publicly traded cannabis stocks. Plus, we'll update the launch of cannabis social clubs in Massachusetts. So don't go away. Cannabis Coast to Coast news continues after this break.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1,300 down to 90. That's why this maize pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Welcome back to the C Block, or final section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News show. I'm Alaina Pinto. One more reminder, if you want to keep track of the nation's cannabis news, you should download the free app for PCM TV or just scan the QR code on the screen. The fate of cannabis consumption lounges, though, continues to evolve in different states, and California has them, and so does Nevada. But in many other legal states, like Massachusetts, these consumption clubs are limited to private membership clubs where consumption is allowed, but sales are not. The Cannabis Control Commission in the Bay State is finally addressing the rules and regulations for these kind of licenses that were part of the original ballot question that paved the way for adult use of cannabis in 2016. The first private membership club for personal consumption to open in the Bay State is the Summit Lounge in Worcester, Massachusetts. Back in 2023, PCM TV founder Jimmy Young hosted 2 live podcasts with interviews and prizes from the Summit Lounge. And now Kyle Moon, the Summit Lounge's proprietor, has penned a letter to the Cannabis Commission sharing his experiences in order to help them make the rules and regulations that will govern this new development of legalization. Kyle's letter was submitted on the final day of public comments, and here are some of his insightful concerns about the expected new license type. According to the letter, Kyle suggests selective interpretation of regulations as well as selective enforcement by inspectors, registered agent badging processes, and fees, security requirements, overregulation pertaining to packaging, marketing, and operational requirements, testing requirements, especially where it intersects with on-site food infusion and consumption. These are some, but definitely not all, of the issues every Massachusetts cannabis licensee is struggling with. If you issue social consumption establishments without addressing these current issues, this license type will be unsustainable and unattainable for equity applicants. Signed, Kyle Moon, CEO, Summit Lounge. Now let's check in with the wild world of cannabis in the state of Oklahoma with Kimmie Cannabis.
I'm Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. On February 3rd, the legislative session begins again, with 22 new bills being proposed that will directly impact Oklahoma's cannabis industry. Stay informed by following okhouse.gov and oksenate.gov for updates. On a lighter note, 2025 events are in the works, and Oklahoma continues to host some of the best cannabis gatherings in the U.S. From weekend camping and river floats to educational conferences, music festivals, and more. That includes High in Heels, the bougie fundraiser event I created, breaking stereotypes while supporting local charities. I love experiencing cannabis culture in other states and encourage others to do the same. Right now, I'm in Honolulu, soaking in the aloha energy at the Hawaii Cannabis Expo, surrounded by amazing people who share a passion for this incredible plant. That's it for this week's Oklahoma Cannabis Update. I'm Kimmie Cannabis with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
In Michigan, one of the longest running celebrations of all things cannabis is the Hash Bash in April. That's one of the oldest in the country, and it even has played host to the late John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who made an appearance in one of the first Hash Bashes in the early 70s. This year's date has been announced, and Amie Carter has more from Michigan.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Michigan's cannabis news has been a bit quiet up until a few days ago. In Pontiac, the FBI is diving into some serious public corruption claims involving current and former city officials. This grand jury investigation is raising eyebrows over the possibility of bribery and shady cash dealings tied to the city's marijuana industry launch. Emails obtained by the Detroit News reveal that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit has even issued a grand jury subpoena for a former city official's bank and personal records. Looks like Pontiac's plans to light up the cannabis scene might be getting a little too smoky. We'll keep you posted on any updates. Stay tuned. The CRA announced a consent order against Albion's-based company prohibiting the grower from operating in the state and permanently banning its owners from participating in the industry. It's suspected that the operation attempted and failed to grow quality mold-free marijuana for the legal market, instead turning to the illicit market, including importing and exporting black market marijuana to and from Michigan. On another note, I know that I'm not the only one looking forward to Hash Bash. This will be year 53. On April 5th, thousands will gather in Ann Arbor to attend America's longest running annual cannabis legalization rally. This is your first reminder to put the date in your calendar. I will be talking a lot about it in the next upcoming weeks. That will do it for this week's Michigan Report. I am Amie Carter with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Great Britain has made some progress and changes to their cannabis laws, but with a new change in government control, what was a promising development has now backfired, further delaying any future reform. One more international market to keep an eye on is Australia. According to Prohibition Partners' new global cannabis report, Australia's medical cannabis revenues are expected to grow from around 600 million in US dollars to more than 1.2 billion by 2028. Now let's check in on the publicly traded stocks with High on Wall Street's Doug Miller.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. The Scott's Miracle Grow Company plans to spin off its marijuana unit, Hawthorne Gardening Company, into a standalone operation, a move company executives believe will make the entity more valuable. With Hawthorne's earnings, the EBITDA expected to be about $20 million this year. The Ohio-based company's leadership determined that the cannabis arms would fare better on its own. The company's board must approve the move, noting that assets could be moved within 2 months. So let's see how the stock chart looks. It's trading around $70 and it's setting up. So watch for dips and any pullbacks as it sets up. It could take a few weeks, and trade smart and lock in those profits. That's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
This is Debi Facey with the Cannabis Coast to Coast Canadian News Report. In 2017, Justin Trudeau decided that he was going to legalize cannabis if he became Prime Minister in Canada. The initial promising of that, though, was when he was elected, not the date that he announces that was a year prior. With that happening, we had stores popping up throughout Ontario, I would say the following week, which was cool, but very, very, very unfortunate. This led to a fallout where the stores were raided and most of the operators as well as tenders faced criminal charges. But the real issue was that Trudeau decided not to take accountability and responsibility for that announcement and the legalization that was going to be coming in a year to come. The accountability was lost. The government should have overseen and ensured a fair responsibility of handling such significant policy changes, especially when it involved a scheduled drug. Our industry is now struggling. The cannabis industry began to formalize the rules and regulations and created them without the input from those that had been involved in the cannabis culture before. These are people that unfortunately had no prior experience in the industry and were suddenly in charge of many of what we now have, which are issues. When it came to the industry, many were driven by the profit rather than the passion or knowledge. And the result made that the genuine individuals that were involved for the right reasons, and the culture, the knowledge, and the legacy, we were pushed out. The big moneymakers were able to now create and sustain due to their big pockets. The lack of effective regulation left most of these cannabis stores not only vulnerable, but an easy way for most to face robberies. With the minimal security measures, these stores became targets. The situation arose from the efforts to hide the true nature of the culture from the public, and with the attempting of making them noticeable, made it more susceptible to crime. I understand that the number of cannabis stores licensed are struggling, and the businesses are especially trying to survive. But with the public not being able to see inside these stores, but the businesses being so vulnerable, it is being neglected when it comes to security. Trudeau's overall failure to stay engaged and address the issues when we not only asked for them, but called for them and begged for them, has led to this new office to want to fix the problems by minimizing the amount of licenses, the amount of stores, the amount of operators, as well as trying to make it fair. We all know that that is going to be something that is going to be hard to swallow. But we all know also at the same time that this is something that may be needed in order for us to recreate what we all were trying to create in the beginning, which was a sustainable, fair industry for not only the operators, bud tenders, but the consumers. And that is both the medical and the recreational. This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast News Report.
Down in Virginia, a U.S. appeals court upheld a Virginia law regulating the sale of hemp products based on the total amount of THC in it. The court did not distinguish if the THC amount was derived from Delta 8 or 9, so no changes in that law in the Cavalier state. But with more from Virginia, here's Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I hope everyone had a great Groundhog Day, and I hope Punxsutawney Phil's reveal doesn't hinder your grow plans for this year. A few weeks ago, one of our viewers, Chuck, left a comment on our YouTube channel that brought up an interesting question. It was one that I'd already been investigating, but his comment got me back on the trail, and here's what I found out. Chuck asked us, I just wonder how much money Governor Youngkin has invested in intoxicating hemp companies. Great question, Chuck. Well, prior to running for governor, Youngkin was the co-CEO of the Carlyle Group from 2018 until 2020 and had 25 years in total with the company. The Carlyle Group is one of the largest private equity groups in the nation and one of the largest investment firms in the world. Glenn Youngkin himself has a net worth of over $440 million and a hefty portfolio. So I did some research on both his investments and what the Carlyle Group had publicly owned or invested in. And I found out that actually neither the Carlyle Group or Youngkin had ever shown to invest or associate in any cannabis-related companies. The fact is, most members, both present and past, of the Carlyle Group are highly conservative and truly don't like cannabis at all and take a prohibitionist attitude towards it. Youngkin, like many others, has been vocal that he feels that it's a gateway drug and has gone as far as to say that he's never met anyone that has used cannabis that was successful. He claims to have never used cannabis himself. Now that falls in line with most prohibitionists that demonize what they have no true experience with and are unwilling to understand or attempt to see from a different perspective. So, there you have it, Chuck. Let's face it, he just doesn't like cannabis. That's how he was raised by Southern conservatives that made well for themselves and, like other wealthy people, They always seem to think that they have the answers for the rest of us, regardless of the facts or evidence presented to them. But that's where we, the people, come in. It's up to us to contact our politicians that do care, and we'll hold the ones that don't accountable. Thanks for the awesome question, Chuck. Keep them coming. Well, that's going to do it from this week from the Virginia Cannabis Connection and reporting from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
And finally tonight, many late-night TV talk show hosts are pretty much pro-cannabis. In Bill Maher's latest special on Cinemax, he shared this story about his personal use and the changes over the past few years. Bill said, "We've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas. Take something like pot. The fact that I can travel this country now without sweating bullets that I did for years, worrying that the drug-sniffing dog at the airport was going to narc me out. For years, I took this much pot and put it in a Kleenex in a ball and hid it under my parts." He hid it under his parts. He didn't say that. He said, scrotum. But the fact that, and then he said this, the fact that I smoked my own ball sweat for like 30 years and now I don't have to, well, that's progress. And that's the end of his quote. I'm sure you can see the whole thing somewhere else. You can't make these stories up. That's disgusting, but you got to do what you got to do. That's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Of course, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so consume it responsibly, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debi Facey with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.